Okay, here we go. So here are some adaptogenic herbs: rhodiola or goldenroot, Panax ginseng, which is Asian ginseng. We have American ginseng or Xiangshen, Schisandra ruwetza, Cannabis sativa. I don't remember the TCM name for that one. Aurelia, licorice or gancao, and astragalus or huangqi. So there are a lot more in these studies, but here are some examples of these, super powerful herbs that we have access to, and we're really lucky. So what is an adaptogen? Um, they're used a lot in modern literature, and then also, they're in products that we see all the time from like reishi mushrooms. But what are they? They have some key qualities. They have to be protective. So it helps to, they have to raise your resistance to physical, chemical, and biological stress. So that means, for example, an endurance runner might want to take some rhodiola before a marathon to help them go the distance, to go longer. Or you might take Schisandra or Eleuthero to help deal with the stress of the day. For example, the Russian government used to give them to their military and to the cosmonauts. And there's a reason cosmonauts were so legendary, how they could stay in space for so long with, being isolated with one or two other people and dealing with the stress of impending doom, being in a little space station. So they help protect you against all different types of stress. They boost recovery. It has a power to normalize the physiological function of organisms suffering from various physical problems. And the other key is that they should have limited or no side effects. And that is what's really amazing about adaptogens. Everyone here knows someone who is on medication, whether it's for depression, depression or anxiety, for heart conditions, for so many things. And some of these have very, very severe side effects. So here's an example of the stress response. The when you take an adaptogen, your response is more sustained. You can see in the pink line. Goes up. Okay, there's stress, but you're able to manage your reaction. And when the stimulating effect of the adaptogen goes down, it doesn't crash you. So here's an example. I mean, if you drink a cup of coffee, you know what happens. You get a lot of energy. This blue dotted line goes up, and then there's a crash. And this is also what happens with dopamine. It goes up, and then there's a crash. You go below baseline, and then you have to finally normalize and come back up. So like I mentioned, there's so many side effects with pharmaceutical drugs, and adaptogens are amazing because, well, that doesn't mean you can take, 200 grams of ginseng, because you can overdose on some of these. But when taken with the right dose, under the right guidance, you can have these amazing effects without side effects. And in fact, you can have side benefits. So every year, scientists and people like you and me are taking adaptogens or herbs and finding out that, hey, they actually help us fall asleep better, or they actually give me more energy, or they actually make me happier. We're finding out about side benefits, like Schisandra ruwetza, the 5-flavor berry. It's been used as an astringent, but it's also got tons and tons of other capabilities, tons of other side benefits. So we'll explore some of those today. So the first study we already went through in class together in detail, so I won't go in too much in detail here. Schisandra fruit vinegar lowers lipid profile in high-fat diet rats. So essentially, they gave rats a high-fat diet, and then they created their own Schisandra vinegar because they found that vinegar actually has a lipid lowering effect already, And Cassandra was also known to have some of those properties, so they combined them. And they found that when they gave these to the high-fat diet rats, their weight went down, their LDL went down, their HDL cholesterol went up, their liver indexes went down, and overall they found that it could be a very powerful treatment for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is on the rise, not just in the U.S. but all over the world, with the dominance of processed foods and poor nutrition, despite access to better food. So this is talking about this Cassandra fruit vinegar. Significantly reduced body weight, liver index, triglycerides, total cholesterol, LDL, free fatty acids, and increased HDL and NRF2, which is an important anti-inflammatory pathway in the body. Any questions on this study before we move on to another one? Okay, so this one's on ashwagandha. The adaptogenic and anxiolytic means that it helps to reduce anxiety. Effects of ashwagandha root extract in healthy adults, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled clinical study. Stress, anxiety, and impeded sleep are a frequent feature of life in modern society. Oh, I didn't know that. Across socioeconomic strata, stress, anxiety, and ineffective sleep detract from healthful living and serve as precursors of various ailments. Everyone's got stress. So ashwagandha has been often used to combat and reduce stress and thereby enhance general well-being. It's been used in Ayurveda, and I think a lot of people in this class probably take some ashwagandha as well. So other studies have documented the use of ashwagandha for stress resistance, but this one, they're actually using a high concentrate root extract and varying the dosage. So trying to find the ideal dosage of combating that stress response. So here's how the study was designed. 8 weeks. They found 60 high-stress male and female participants with a baseline perceived stress score of over 20. They gave a placebo pill, 125 milligrams or 300 milligrams of extract twice daily. So they assessed stress using this PSS score, the perceived stress. They also measured anxiety. They also measured sleep quality. And then they compared the two treatments with placebo afterwards. So surprise, surprise, ashwagandha was considerably effective compared to the placebo. Improvement in sleep quality, lower anxiety, lower serum cortisol, and lower perceived stress. Some of the limitations were they need a larger sample size, a longer study perhaps, and different testing parameters. Any questions on this one? Okay.
What was the dosage on that for ashwagandha?
They compared 125 milligrams and 300 milligrams. And I believe that at 300 milligrams, that was the strongest effect. And I don't believe that there were any adverse events reported. But everyone's different. You can go and try your own extracts. Like I got Schisandra and I got Eleuthero and I got Rhodiola, and I'm experimenting with them. But you have to be careful about the dosage because you might have some insomnia, like I did last night. Okay. So the role of adaptogens in prophylaxis and treatments of viral respiratory infections. So this one was aimed at demonstrating the potential of herbal preparations, specifically adaptogens for prevention and treatment of respiratory infections. To increase resistance to viral infection, inhibit severe inflammatory progression, and drive effective recovery. So why did they do that? Obviously, this is a recent study. So, COVID changed the entire landscape of how we look at disease transmission, treatment, testing, so many things. But like it says here, brought new challenges to biomedical sciences, specifically the development of effective therapeutics for acute viral and stress-induced diseases. of course, we at this school and maybe some of our friends know about the power of herbs in treating viral infections. Like, I don't know, maybe everyone has yin chow san or chai hu guijitang and some other formulas at home that they take when they get sick. But most people don't know, and the people who maybe do know about herbs underestimate its power. So this study really wanted to show the solid evidence on not only the effectiveness, but also safety of using herbs to treat viral infections. And it also says that the risk of adverse events is significantly higher for synthetic antiviral and immunotropic drugs than for the vast majority of herbal preparation. So there are over 100 plants exhibiting adaptogenic activity, but they only included the ones that exhibit, quote, multi-target effects on the neuroendocrine immune system by triggering adaptive stress response, including stimulation of cellular and organismal defense systems, activation of intra and extracellular adaptive signaling pathways, and expression of stress-activated proteins to change protection and repair capacity, to increase non-specific resistance and adaptation stress. Wow, that's too many details. Okay, so here are the studies that they cover. Here are the herbs that they studied. So Andrographis, Eleuthero, which is Sibujia, licorice, Gansao, Asian ginseng or Renshin, rhodiola, I think is Hongjing Tian, if anyone's correct me. Schisandra ruwetsa and ashwagandha. I don't know the Chinese name for that one. So this is just a little graph with lots of details, little graphic. So has a lot of these adaptogens have direct antiviral effects, anti-inflammatory activity, detox and reparation of oxidative stress, induced damages in compromised cells, and modulation of the immune response. So here are the results. Adaptogens can be used in prophylaxis and treatment of viral infections and aiding recovery of the organism by modulating innate and adaptive immunity, anti-inflammatory activity, detox and repair of oxidative stress, direct antiviral effects of inhibiting viral docking or replication, and improving quality of life during convalescence. Any questions on this one? Okay. So here is the adaptogenic effects of Panax ginseng or Renshin or Asian ginseng on the modulation of cardiovascular functions. So obviously, as we know, cardiovascular diseases are growing at a really rapid rate, high morbidity and mortality, and the drugs that a lot of people are on for congestive heart failure, arrhythmia, a lot of them have really strong side effects. So ginseng is, well respected, has been used for thousands of years for inflammation, allergy, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and even cancer with some amazing effects. So this study wanted to show some of that evidence. So for example, the side effects, antiplatelet drugs such as aspirin cause prolonged bleeding time in gastric ulcers. Clopidogrel treatment can cause aplastic anemia and thrombocytopenic purpura, and antihypertensive drugs frequently cause sexual dysfunction. So one thing I wanted to touch on with all of these, ginseng and all of these other herbs that are being studied, they have bioactive compounds, which are the plant's natural defenses. So when we create extracts and we create our own herbal compounds from these herbs, we're taking the bioactive compounds, we're extracting them, and then we're either making a pure extract of those or we're combining them with other extracts in order to create really potent natural is it nutraceuticals? Anyway, natural drugs to help treat some of these diseases. So it's the plant's natural defenses, which we are then using to help treat ourselves and all the diseases that we come across. So ginseng has so many ginsenosides, polysaccharides, peptides, alkaloids, and phenolic compounds, which are the main pharmacologically active constituents in ginseng. And you'll learn more about this if you haven't taken that class with Dr. Williams. I can't remember right now. Okay. So ginseng, antihypertensive, vasodilatory, aphrodisiac, cardioprotective, antiplatelet and antithrombotic, increases HDL and lowers LDL, anti-hyperlipidemic, anti-obesity, improved cognitive function and prevent Alzheimer's disease. I mean, it's truly incredible. Ginseng is amazing. So this, I mean, I'm going like 3 slides on some of these studies, but you can see how powerful some of these, adaptogens are. So afterwards, if you really wanted to nerd out, I can send you all the studies. So here's the next one on rhodiola. They tried to basically examine the short-term effects of rhodiola extract on athletic performance. So they measured the blood lactate, essentially lactic acid buildup in the body, the catecholamines, which are essentially, epinephrine and norepinephrine, and the performance during bench press, essentially. So rhodiola traditionally used to combat altitude sickness, fatigue, and mood disturbances. So you can see here the 2 compounds of phenolic glycosides and rosamin. They've been used for hormonal modulation, increased activity of the central nervous system, and improvement in cellular energy production in order to aid in attenuation of various types of stress, including mental, metabolic, oxidative, physical, and exercise-induced stress. And so many adaptogens do the same thing. So here are the details of the study. It was basically they had 10 trained males who already had a strength training routine. They gave them 1,500 milligrams of golden root extract, rhodiola rosea, or placebo for 3 days prior, and then another 500 grams 30 minutes prior to testing. So essentially what they found was that rhodiola helped increase their explosiveness. So they were able to get like more explosive lifts, and they actually measured that by gauging the mean concentric velocity, but they found that actually lowered endurance during those bench presses. Could also be down to study design, but just to show you, not every herb is perfect, but also could be the study that wasn't perfect in the design. So I think this one is a really important study. There's a lot of details here, so just bear with me, but I'm going to try to explain it. So adaptogens on depression-related outcomes, a systematic integrated review and rationale of synergism with physical activity. So here they didn't want to just show the evidence of adaptogens on depression, but they wanted to combine with physical activity, because physical activity has been found to actually help treat depression. So it's obviously a non-pharmaceutical intervention to treat depression. And so when you combine these two, you have a really powerful effect. So they want to describe the effects of supplementation with adaptogens on variables related to depression in adults, to discuss a potential combination with physical exercise. So they studied, and this was a systematic review of other studies. So they basically listed these by the amount of strong evidence that's behind the data. So St. John's wort and saffron were the 2 most studied and had the most meta-reviews and other systematic reviews that they included in these studies. Other ones were rhodiola, ginseng, maca root, and ashwagandha. So like I said, there are a lot of details, but just bear with me here. So allostatic load is defined as the additional energetic burden that the organism must bear to adapt and survive. And then we have interoception, which is essentially like how we model the world in our brain. And allostatic load can be seen as control. So the core of depression is a disorder of the metabolism energy regulation. For example, the allostasis overload. with the sensory consequences of that regulation, or altered interoception, which results in a locked-in depressed brain. So the greater the allostatic load, the more severe the depressive symptoms. And down here it says more and more studies supporting physical exercise and evidence-based treatment for depression to reduce the allostatic load. So here's the data that's included. So 5,922 predominantly females, age 18 to 97, so a wide range of ages, which is very good for this study. Most participants diagnosed with mild to moderate major depressive disorder, and they found that St. John's wort was the most studied adapted in the sample of included articles. So they found that the adaptogens improvements on the depressive symptoms probably due to the positive impact on allostatic load. Depression arises from chronic energy inefficiency and an alternate default mode network, interoceptive signaling. How we see the world changes when we're depressed. So this goes into a lot of details of specific pathways. Honestly, like if you want to learn how scientists and people researching this view depression and the sort of brain models that they look at, it's actually very fascinating because they're showing these brain models, they're showing how they understand depression, and they're showing how adaptogens and their bioactive compounds target each one of these pathways and help to treat depressive symptoms. So here's a graphic to help explain this. So up top, you can see Hypericum perforatum, which is St. John's wort, saffron and rhodiola. There's a little exclamation mark because it doesn't have enough evidence for this study. But basically, they increase the BDNF pathway, increase energy sufficiency, which is, they're decreasing allostatic load, modulating immunity, and also increased antioxidant activity. So through those pathways, they help to treat depression and can be used alongside physical exercise. Any questions there?
Was there any information in that study on what degrees of depression, like could it treat like bipolar disorder, or is it just more of like a mild depression?
From my understanding, I mean, it wasn't just mild, moderate, severe, but they didn't differentiate there. They just basically focused on treating the symptoms of depression and how it pertains to like the way they explain depression through like cellular allostasis and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
So I think they just use depressive symptoms as their guideline. And actually, I did ask one of I mentioned this study to one of my patients, and they mentioned that they actually were taking St. John's root and it did help. But one side effect of taking St. John's root is that it actually made them very sensitive to sunlight. So they couldn't be outside a lot. And in California, that's tough unless you just went through the winter we went through. So it was pretty cool to see that, one of my patients were actually using this. So really powerful stuff. So in this next study, they studied the effect of Schisandra on the adaptive capability of rats under chronic and general exposure to cold. So this study was from, I believe it was from Russia. And of course, parts of Russia are very cold, also parts of, northern China. And so they found that there's a deficiency in the diet of Russians, vitamin C, beta carotene, and minerals, including calcium and iron, regardless of the season of the year. So they're trying to solve this very specific problem. So they wanted to study Schisandra to create food products to help people deal with cold, to help, restore some of these vitamins and energy. So they studied 3 different groups of rats. The control received food and water. The group 2 received or were exposed to cold and received food and water. And then groups 3 to 5 were exposed to cold, received food and water, and they had varying doses of Schisandra. Basically, it led to an increase in resistance to fatigue and increase in the duration of swimming in all days of the experiment. So the rats that had Schisandra in higher and higher doses were less concerned with the cold as they were swimming more and more. So to be specific, Schisandra increased the non-specific reactivity of the body, stimulated the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis, which is acted on by all adaptogens, and increased the activity of antioxidant defense mechanisms, stabilized biological membranes, protected them from decay during overload, and promote the process of synthesis and metabolism, kind of renewal, rejuvenation of the body. So obviously this is on mice, but really, really strong potential for studies on humans and to use this as, energy drink. So this one's pretty cool. This is an in vitro study, which means it was, on a petri dish in a lab. So nanoscale insight into biochemical changes in cervical cancer cells exposed to adaptogenic drug. So Witherferin A is an extract, one of those bioactive compounds that I mentioned, of ashwagandha, an important ingredient in Indian Ayurvedic medicine, widely studied for its anti-inflammatory properties. So Witherferin A has great potential in inhibiting the proliferation of cancer cells in a dose-dependent manner. So you can see here in the center, so here are the untreated cells, the actin, the nuclei, and these are the treated cells. So you can see they're smaller and fewer. So it's pretty amazing. With just using this extract, they were able to reduce the size and the quantity of cervical cancer cells. So not only can adaptogens help us deal with stress and maybe swim longer in the cold, but they can also treat cancer. Does anyone know what this is? Anyone? Bueller?
Is it ginseng?
No, it's not ginseng. Ginseng, the root of ginseng actually looks like a human. That's why they call it man root. So you'll see it's I'll show you, I'll go back to the picture later.
Is it asparagus too?
It is. Yeah, it is asparagus. So this study was studying the wild Asparagus racemosus, which is also known as tianmandang or shatavari, which is as an Ayurvedic herb. So they were looking at the adaptogenic effects of asparagus, not the actual part you eat, but the root. So this one was also on depression. So here's the depression effects explained through the hyperactivity of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that I mentioned before, the activated inflammatory and immune response, and the monoaminogenic deficit hypothesis, which essentially means the deficit of dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, these really crucial neurotransmitters that are occurring in the depressed brain. And then also GABAergic deficit response. So same thing. So when depressed brains have a deficit of GABA. So asparagus has pleiotropic therapeutic activity, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, immunomodulator, neuroprotective, nootropic, which means it helps to enhance brain activity, cognitive activity, and also antidepressant. So asparagus, I'm not going to keep saying racemosus because I don't know how to pronounce it. So I'm just going to say asparagus. Administration at varied levels alleviated depression by modulating HPA axis, increasing BDNF levels, monoaminogenic GABAergic neurotransmission, and a lot more details. But It could be a new generation antidepressant that provides relief from both behavioral and somatic illnesses without major side effects. So that's amazing. So I just have one last study. I know we're at about 30 minutes. So this one is on cannabis sativa. Probably no one knows what that is. And non-psychoactive compounds, their chemistry and role against oxidative stress, inflammation, and cancer. So the effects of THC and CBD on inflammation and cancer pain are well known in the literature. The National Cancer Institute recognizes medicinal cannabis sativa as an effective treatment for providing relief in a number of symptoms associated with cancer, pain, loss of appetite, nausea and vomiting, and anxiety. So the non-psychoactive element, bioactive compound CBD, has adaptogenic effects. It's antioxidant, anti-cancer, actually increases autophagy, so the destruction of cancer cells, and apoptosis, so the cell death of cancer cells, and inhibits their proliferation. Inhibits the migration of breast cancer cells. It's anti-inflammatory, antibiotic, neuroprotective, anxiolytic, anticonvulsant, anti-nausea, antimicrobial, anti. So that's all I've got. I know that was a lot. I hope by this point you can see how incredibly powerful these bioactive compounds are from plants, and how much potential there is to use these to help treat all sorts of disease. I'm probably going to take a little dropper of rhodiola after this to get some energy. Yeah, any questions?
Awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so would you please, stop recording and then so we can go through questions and answers. Sure. Thanks.
I can figure out how.